That's bad.
So this Mustang's actually starting to look like something. Got the radiator in place, need to make little tabs to hold it, but the hoses are in place. The bottom one is pretty close to the balancer. Not really sure if it's gonna rub yet, but got the water pump on and the alternator mount on. Found a perfect upper radiator hose, just had to cut a little bit off of it. It's for a 67 Camaro with a small block in it, fits perfect. The bottom one I think is 2, but I don't know, might try to find a smaller balancer or something for it, or modify the port on the water pump, because like I said, it's 0.5 millimeter from it. And then obviously engine bay cleaned up really well, aside from this that I think I'm going to just get rid of. Like, this thing's never going to be a street car again. It's not going to need most of that stuff. And today we're actually going to start tackling the wiring on this thing, which should be pretty quick. I mean, it's an old carbureted big block. We don't need much. Ignition, starter, fuel pump, water pump and fans, lights. That's it. So to accomplish our wiring, we're going to keep things real simple. Just going to make a switch panel that bolts in where the radio was. And we're using toggles and a push button. Oh yeah. Keep it simple, dummy. So I'm going to cut up an aluminum plate, which I just so happen to have. I've got this one that I ordered for the Starfire, that Pro Street Starfire. That one didn't fit, so they then sent me this one, which also didn't fit. So, because apparently there's like 3 or 4 different style heater boxes for those cars. So, I got lucky and had the one that this company didn't make the plate for yet. So I ended up just making my own and saying good enough. So, I'm going to cut up one of these for the aluminum plate for our switch panel. And then we'll just probably like self-tap it in place, something like that. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. Gotta take some measurements for that, get this thing cut, and then we'll start running some wires. All right, got the plate all cut out. So, going to just drill some holes now, put these in there exactly like this. So this one will be ignition, starter, fuel pump, oh gosh, water pump, fan, all that stuff. So I'm going to get those drilled and get that in place. Only a handful of wires to run. I got a set of battery in the front there. Oh yeah, I got the front all cleaned up. Doesn't that look a whole lot better? I am going to keep the battery up in the stock location. All right, got it all drilled out, kind of just sitting in place. I'm debating on taking some wrinkle black to it, which I think I'm going to do. Make it a little bit more understated. All right, it's the next day, and I've been making some pretty decent progress on everything. Starting to wire things up, just kind of tackling it. Switch panels going in there, getting some of the wires ran. I just have to run like the main power to everything, and then the fuel pump wire. And then, like I said, that last switch is a dead switch for right now, but that's all looking pretty good. Engine bay's pretty clean, got some wires ran. There's, like I said earlier, there's not a whole lot of wires that are going to be coming out here. The thing that slightly annoys me is that most of the wires are going to have to go kind of their own way. So, like we got this bright-ass yellow wire that's going to be up for the headlights that I'm going to route inside the fender. And then we got the blue wire for the water pump and fan going under the intake, so that's a little hidden. Purple wire for the starter, red wire for the ignition for the distributor, because it's just a basic HEI. And then there was probably 40 metric tons of just expletives in there that I got all vacuumed out, so that's looking pretty good. So really, once the transmission's here, I can get that in, got a converter for it. I'll just use the Jegs one that was in the S10, because it's just a manual valve body turbo 350. It's actually the original one out of the Betty White Firebird I had. Pulled that out to put in a 350 with a trans brake, and then now it's 2-3 years later, getting it back again. So yeah, I'll probably use the Jegs converter with that. It should flash a little bit higher. This thing on motor, I don't expect it to blow through it, but if it does, we got another one over there we can put in it. It'll be a whole lot tighter though. It's a Circle D one that came out of Jack when he had the big block. Yeah, so once the transmission's in, shifter's hooked up, finish up the wiring, button up the fuel system, which as long as that pump works, I'll blow out the lines, make sure they're good. And then I just have to make a new line from the regulator to the carburetor there. All right, now that the switch panel is pretty much done, just have to run power to everything. We can move on to the shifter. And just my personal opinion, I am not a fan of these mega shifters. So this thing has got to go. But what I am a big fan of is these pistol grip gated shifters. This one just happens to have these buttons because I'm a very basic bitch sometimes. And I just like the feel of these. Luckily, they're both B&M shifters, so I can reuse the cable that's already in the car and not have to deal with that. I'll save the other one for something in the future, maybe if this one ever gets messed up or something. Who knows? So all I got to do is screw this down to the floor, hook up the cable, and we're pretty much good to go. The buttons, I'm not going to have to worry about wiring up immediately because the transmission I'm putting in this doesn't have a trans brake. We don't have our nitrous yet. I could use one for a line lock, but it doesn't have line lock either. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants on this. Just foot brake it and see what happens. Alright, shifter's in. I have no idea how to get that cover on without bending it, so screw it. We're just going to roll without. Did manage to find a fitting for the fuel system so we can get that all buttoned up. I just have to get that tightened and then make a line from here to there. So I'm going to get that made real quick and get that tossed on. And the fuel system is done. I got the pump wired up. I kind of want to check the ground to make sure that's good because I'm reusing the ground that was on the car. I also have no idea if the fuel pump itself is any good yet. Kind of just wishful thinking that it is. And then I'm just transmission, which like I said, I'm getting a Turbo 350 from a buddy, which means I can reuse the mount, shifter cable and everything. That's all good now. The drive shaft is already set up for a Turbo 350, so we're good there. At that point, it's basically got to make the battery cables, which isn't a big deal. Need like a 4-foot one or so for the positive over to the starter. I also got to get the starter on. That's over on the shelf. Make the ground cable. I got wires. Need plugs for it. Like I said, there's just a handful of things, and then we can fire this thing up and get the cam broken in. And I know that in this post-pandemic world, cam manufacturers have been putting out some real stinkers for quality. I've seen so many people post videos where their cams just flatten like that, or the lifters fail, stuff like that. With flat tappets, bringing them in, I'm already nervous to begin with, but with the way things have been the past couple of years, I'm especially nervous this time. All right, it is the next day. Been making some pretty good progress on the car. Fingers crossed things can keep progressing. I know I'm going to be waiting on a few parts, but we might be able to actually fire this thing up and move it under its own power by the end of the week. So you saw shifter is installed. Looking pretty ripe. Got the cable in. I have to put the clip on for the cable. I might actually make a new hole to move it over, just because. But a few things left to do. I got to get the steering shaft back in, like the little intermediate shaft. Hopefully that should, it looks like it'll clear no problem. I also have to, you can kind of tell, I have to pull out. How the fuck am I gonna do this? I gotta change the output spout on the water pump with this one that I made for the mid-engine S10. Hopefully that should clear then, because it is way too close to that balancer, and luckily we kept the water pump off of that. So I'll get that thrown in there. Got the line made for the regulator to the carburetor. So fuel system, as long as the pump works, haven't tested it, that's all good. So I don't know where we actually left off. I got the transmission earlier today though. This unit right here, absolute devastator. So this transmission came out of, like I said earlier, I'm pretty sure, this came out of Betty White, that 94, 95 white 4th gen Firebird I had. Back when that was a nitrous 6.0 car, and it went like 9 something. in that car, leaving off a foot brake. So this thing should, you know, knock on wood, this thing should foot brake pretty good because it's got pretty decent torque and a pretty cheap converter in it. I'm gonna keep cranking on this thing, get the transmission in, get all that knocked out tonight, and try and get as much done as I can tonight because I got a bunch of other stuff that I need to work on tomorrow, which I might try to get back to work on this real quick too, because this thing, to get it fired up, I have to connect 2 lines back there and wire up the fuel pump. So hopefully there will be a video soon of firing that thing up for the first time. But anyway, I'm gonna get back to work on this and turn some heat on. We have made quite a bit of progress today. Got the shifter in, transmission in, converter in. Converter's not bolted up. Transmission is bolted up. Drive shaft is almost in. Got to find some bolts for the rear end. And I've got to get the shift cable installed, which I have no idea how I'm going to do that just yet, because like here's the transmission pan, right here's the header. It is incredibly close, so I don't know if I can ding it in or if I just need to like cut and notch part of that pipe. It's right on the collector, luckily, I guess. But yeah, it is very close. Very, very close. And I got to dent in one of the primaries on this. You can kind of see it right there. But yeah, now that the engine's sitting about where it's going to sit, that's unhappy and the distributor's unhappy. That is into the firewall a whole lot more than I'd like. So I've got to dent in the firewall without smashing those brake lines. I should be able to undo the fasteners and lift them up out of the way, pull that in the carb out, and just whap, hit it with that whop. But everything else is looking pretty happy, I think. Got some stuff that showed up. Some 8-gauge to power a couple things. Cheapo transmission dipstick. Just one of those flexible ones. Went with a Delco filter. I did get that extension piece on the water pump, and we're looking pretty chill there, so that's nice. So the radiator hoses are actually done and clamped on, never coming off again. Still have to bolt up the converter, I think I said that. Might have to shim the starter, won't really know that until I try to start the motor, which will hopefully happen this week, as long as everything else keeps chugging along. But right now I'd say the biggest thing is clearancing this header for the shift cable. But yeah, we've made a lot of progress. But that's going to do it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, clicking that bell to get the notifications. I'll see you next time.